Isn't that weird? It was the weirdest thing I've ever seen. Even comedians would get on stage and they would shame people for trying to get informed about a medical treatment that was experimental that they had to take or they would lose their jobs and they wouldn't be able to travel. And when people tried to get informed about that, other people shamed them. They would say, please tell me you're not going to do your own research. You've heard people say that. Please don't do your own research. You know, before COVID, doing your own research used to be called reading. Now you're shaming me for reading? At the behest of Big Pharma? It's like I woke up in the middle of a Bill Hicks bit. Well, looks like we got ourselves a reader. That's how much people internalized the propaganda from Big Pharma, was that they would be anti-intellectual enough to shame people for reading while they're wagging their finger at them for doing it. You would never shame people for trying to get informed, no matter what other subject it was, no matter how unimportant. Like if I say, hey, I'm gonna go buy a car. Don't look into it. Well, how will I know which car to get? Ask the salesman. He's the expert. What are you, Henry Ford?
伙计，乖乖，希望老头了，亲眼看到拍照来过，亲眼看到的啊，这是我这本事啊，缥缈到的伙计。拍照来过。
fifth-generation warfare, you do not know who your opponent is. Example, who is responsible for, who's the puppet master behind the COVID crisis as we've experienced it? Who is it? Anybody here know? Was it Klaus? No. There's something above Klaus. Was it Biden? Was it Tony Fauci? These are all surrogates, okay? You don't really know who is managing the message that has been propagated on you. That's fifth-generation warfare. Over the last 3 years, Western governments, non-governmental organizations, transnational organizations, pharmaceutical industry corporations, media and financial corporations have cooperated via public-private partnerships, which I assert is a euphemism for fascism, to deploy the most massive, globally harmonized psychological and propaganda operation in the history of the world. Okay? Over the last 3 years, you have been subjected to the most massive, harmonized, globally coordinated propaganda campaign in the history of the Western world. Full stop. With this campaign, the governments of many Western nation states have turned, okay, this is key, military-grade psychological operations strategies, tactics, technologies, and capabilities developed for modern military combat against their own citizens. These are inconvenient facts. The world that many of us believed existed no longer exists if it ever did.
There's no study in the world that shows that masks work that well. So you're never going to get the kind of benefit from mandatory year-round masking as you would from making substantial improvements in indoor air quality. But it's a lot easier to implement as well.
Dr. Fauci, do you know Sylvia Burwell?
I do.
Who's that?
Sylvia Burwell is the former Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services and the current president of American University.
Did she email you in February of 2020 asking whether she should wear a mask as she was traveling in the airport in the early stages of the pandemic?
Objection, speculative.
Sylvia has, over the past couple of years, asked me advice about personal safety during the COVID-19 pandemic.
And in particular, in February of 2020, did she email you and say, I am traveling to redacted. Folks are suggesting I take a mask for the airport. Is this something I should do?
Objection, lack of foundation.
You know, I don't recall specifically that. I do know that Sylvia has called me over the last couple of years asking me questions about health. I don't specifically recall that.
Do you recall writing this in response? Masks are really for infected people to prevent them from spreading infection to people who are not infected, rather than protecting uninfected people from acquiring infection. The typical mask you buy in the drugstore is not really effective in keeping out virus, which is small enough to pass through material. It might, however, provide some slight benefit in keep out gross droplets if someone coughs or sneezes on you. I do not recommend that you wear a mask, particularly since you're going to a low-risk location.
Do you remember when they closed all the gyms and the churches and the small businesses for your safety, but left open fast food stores and big box corporate stores and liquor stores because they were essential? Do you remember how when the kids did eventually go back to school, but had to wear masks, but were told they could play their full contact sports, but they had to wear masks during those sports in order to keep themselves safe? Do you remember that? Do you remember telling people how ridiculous that was? Just overnight, people who had the most common sense, just everyday normal people, now suddenly were fighting other people because those other people weren't wearing masks. Do you remember that? Remember how fucking gobsmacked you were? Do you remember the moment that it first dawned on you how quickly people would line up to protect the very system that was blatantly lying to them about everything to begin with? For your own sake, I hope you never forget it.
Hello, you have reached the Department of Public Safety stay-at-home hotline. The information you leave is considered public information. At the tone, please leave the following information: your name, your callback number, how the stay-at-home order is being violated, and where the stay-at-home order was violated. Thank you.
Record your message at the tone. When you are finished, hang up or press pound for more options.
More cautious when reading about COVID on Twitter.
Be extra cautious when you're looking for health information in the Twitterverse.
The company drops its COVID misinformation policy.
Twitter has dropped its COVID-19 misinformation policy.
Be cautious while looking for health information in the Twitterverse.
Be extra cautious while looking for health information in the Twitterverse.
Be extra cautious while looking for health information in the Twitterverse.
Be extra cautious while looking for health information in the Twitterverse.
Be extra cautious while looking for health information on the Twitterverse.
Be extra cautious while looking for health information on the Twitterverse.
Be extra cautious while looking for health information in the Twitterverse.
Be extra cautious while looking for health information on Twitter.
Be extra cautious while looking at health information on Twitter.
Be extra cautious while looking for health information on Twitter. Be extra cautious while looking for health information on Twitter.
Be extra cautious while you're looking for health information on Twitter.
Be extra cautious while looking for health information on Twitter.
Place your gun on bang, 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 foot down on bang, 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 place your gun.
I got a big fat ass. Come on.
But I hadn't been for Cotton Eye Joe. I've been married a long time ago. Where did you come from? Where did you go? Where did you come from, Cotton Eye Joe? But I hadn't been for Cotton Eye Joe. I've been married a long time ago. Where did you come from? Where did you go? Where did you come from, Cotton Eye Joe?
Wow, you can really dance. Wow, you can really dance. He went. They said we've both been dancing all this time. What a coincidence.
And I hope they use the hydroxychloroquine, and they can also do it with Z-Pak, subject to your doctor's approval and all of that. But I hope they use it because I'll tell you what do you have to lose? In some cases, they're in bad shape. What do you have to lose? It's been out there for a long time, and I hope they use it. And they're going to look at with doctors, work with doctors, get what you have to get. But we have it stockpiled, and we have a lot of it.
First at 11, President Trump home from the hospital after 3 days of treatment for COVID-19. But his doctors say he's still contagious and is not out of the woods. Good evening.
A lot of good things have come out about the hydroxy. A lot of good things have come out. And you'd be surprised at how many people are taking it, especially the frontline workers, before you catch it. The frontline workers, many are taking it. I happen to be taking it.
Hydroxychloroquine?
I'm taking it, hydroxychloroquine.
When?
Right now, yeah. A couple of weeks ago, I started taking it. Because I think it's good. I've heard a lot of good stories. And if it's not good, I'll tell you right, I'm not going to get hurt by it. It's been around for 40 years for malaria, for lupus, for other things. I take it. Frontline workers take it. A lot of doctors take it. A lot of doctors take it. I take it. Now, I hope to not be able to take it soon because, I hope they come up with some answer.
How many people, doctor, do you speculate unnecessarily died because of the lack of interventions for COVID?
Well, that's hard to say, but I've treated over 6,000 COVID patients, and everybody that I treated early within the first week survived and did well. And I even had some patients come in the second and third week who were really, really sick, but they refused to go to the hospital, and I was able to keep them alive. I mean, these people came in with oxygen saturations in the 50s, really, really sick. So it's hard to say how many could have been saved, but a substantial number of people could have been saved with proper early treatment.
The FDA is virtually controlled by Pfizer. Pfizer has control, not Johnson & Johnson, not Moderna, but Pfizer has control over the FDA.
And then of all the people that have recently been admitted with COVID, how many of those people are fully vaccinated? How many of your fully vaccinated employees are having breakthrough cases? And of the 2,879 patients that have died in your hospitals, how many of them were refused early treatment? Yes. Financially, we have a lot of questions. In 2019, Methodist Hospital reported over $4 billion in assets. This was before COVID. Let's see what they've done since COVID. How much have your executives profited from the COVID windfall? Do you have any financial relationships with the vaccine companies? How much are you making from the vaccines? How much have you been rewarded by giving remdesivir? And what have your complications been from giving remdesivir? Remdesivir kills. Because they have not responded to my request for information, I decided to take legal action against Methodist. All right. I'm not seeking any financial gains from this or personal gain. I am simply seeking the truth, which we all deserve.
Of the definition of people dying of COVID. So the case definition is very simplistic. It means at the time of death, it was a COVID positive diagnosis. So that means that if you were in hospice and had already been given a few weeks to live, and then you also were found to have COVID, that would be counted as a COVID death. It means that even if you died of a clear alternate cause, but you had COVID at the same time, it's still listed as a COVID death. So everyone who's listed as a COVID death doesn't mean that that was the cause of the death, but they had COVID at the time of death. I hope that's helpful.
I don't know how many times I can say it, Madam Chair. We did not fund gain-of-function research to be conducted in the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
In our health lead, we now know that a bat coronavirus was enhanced in a lab.
NIH and NIAID categorically has not funded gain-of-function research to be conducted in the Wuhan Institute.
The National Institutes of Health acknowledged that it funded research of a virus that was studied at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. The experiment unexpectedly, we're told, made a bat coronavirus more contagious than the original naturally occurring one.
Dr. Fauci, knowing that it is a crime to lie to Congress, do you wish to retract your statement of May 11th where you claimed that the NIH never funded gain-of-function research in Wuhan?
Senator Paul, I have never lied before the Congress, and I do not retract that statement.
A new letter raising questions about experiments in a Wuhan lab.
Let me finish.
You take an animal virus and you increase its transmissibility to humans.
Right.
You're saying that's not gain of function?
Yeah, that is correct. And Senator Paul, you do not know what you are talking about, quite frankly. And I want to say that officially. You do not know what you are talking about.
For years, the National Institutes of Health provided grant money to the EcoHealth Alliance Research Group, which conducted experiments with bat coronaviruses in Wuhan, China.
And if anybody is lying here, Senator, it is you. That's where you are getting. Let me finish.
We don't know.
Well, wait a minute.
It did come from the lab, but all the evidence is pointing that it came from the lab, and there will be responsibility for those who funded the lab, including yourself.
National Institute of Health admitted this week that it funded controversial gain-of-function research using coronaviruses at a lab in China at the epicenter of the pandemic, contradicting claims from Dr. Anthony Fauci that American tax dollars never paid for that kind of research.
I have not lied before Congress. I have never lied. Certainly not before Congress. Case closed.
It's going to get worse.
empty as hell.
No one's in there, guys.
It's absolutely dead.
Il y a personne. Regardez, on peut aller fouiller dans les couloirs, on peut faire absolument ce qu'on veut. Je comprends pas.
Not many people were in there at all.
It's a ghost town in this hospital.
We've just been locked down in Gloucestershire for an empty hospital. Look, I am so angry.
So there's nobody even in there? Nobody's in there. Nobody's in the hospital? How is that possible in a medical pandemic?
That's fake news, that's why. That's fake news, that's why. That's fake news, that's why.
Did you say free fries when you get vaccinated? I got vaccinated. You're saying I could get this? These delicious fries? Wait a minute. But there's also a burger element to this? If this is appealing to you, just think of this when you think of vaccination. Vaccination.
You are the unvaccinated. You are the problem. It is the unvaccinated who are the problem. Period. End of story.
The only people that you can blame, this isn't shaming, this is the truth. Maybe they should be shamed, are the unvaccinated.
It's time to start blaming the unvaccinated folks, not the regular folks.
Anyone you came into contact with will blame you, as will the rest of us who have done the right thing by getting vaccinated.
Because frankly, we know that we can't trust the unvaccinated.
I think it's time to get our moral house in order, Anderson. It's the unvaccinated who are the threat.
All of us vaccinated folks are going to start wearing masks to protect the unvaccinated folks. It's called a Christian value.
You're basically punishing the vaccinated for the sins of the unvaccinated.
People are not behaving honorably. The unvaccinated are basically saying, well, it's open season for me. I can do whatever I want as well.
The unvaccinated are basically beating their breasts, running around the country saying, we don't care, we're living free, and so forth.
We've been patient, but our patience is wearing thin.
Unvaccinated, a group that includes children and people acting like children. And the rest of us are starting to get pissed off.
The vaccinated feel the unvaccinated are making me upset or angry.
This is not about freedom or personal choice.
Well, my freedom is being kind of disturbed here. No, screw your freedom.
The other day, Howard Stern weighed in with a much different approach. Take a look.
When are we going to stop putting up with the idiots in this country and just say, it's mandatory to get vaccinated? Their freedom.
But you're treading on our freedom and you're making other people sick, and really you're killing other people.
The anti-vaxxers, they seem to have a thing for death and home remedies.
The anti-maskers turned anti-vaxxers are not just putting their own lives at risk. If that was the issue, we could just say that we can watch them compete to win place or show in the Darwin Awards.
We have to start doing things for the greater good of society, and not for idiots who think that they can do their own research. And don't get me started on the lunatics who won't take any of the COVID vaccines.
Life is too short to be an ass. Life is way too short to be ignorant of the promise of something that is helping people worldwide.
Maybe you're doing it because you're disconnected or disorganized. Maybe you have some sympathetic psychological reasons. But maybe you're just being antisocial. Oh, you can't shame them. You can't call them stupid. You can't call them silly. Yes, they are.
Those who are not vaccinated will end up paying the price.
The unvaccinated should be taxed. They should pay more for health care.
We need to start looking at the choice to remain unvaccinated the same as we look at driving while intoxicated.
We're going to see, and I've said, almost two types of America.
Dr. Fauci said that if hospitals get any more overcrowded, they're going to have to make some very tough choices about who gets an ICU bed. That choice doesn't seem so tough to me. Vaccinated person having a heart attack? Yes, come right on in. We'll take care of you. Unvaccinated guy who gobbled horse goo? Rest in peace, Wheezy.
Pointing back to the unvaccinated who are really creating a problem in this country, every death that we are seeing from COVID could have been prevented.
Literally, the only people dying are the unvaccinated. And for those of you spreading misinformation, shame on you.
Our fellow Americans.
Right now, the COVID-19 vaccines are available to millions of Americans.
And soon, they will be available to everyone.
The science is clear. These vaccines will protect you and those you love from this dangerous and deadly disease.
They could save your life.
So we urge you to get vaccinated when it's available to you.
That's the first step to ending the pandemic and moving our country forward. It's up to you.
This portion of CBS This Morning sponsored by Pfizer.
Good Morning America is brought to you by Pfizer.
CBS Health Watch sponsored by Pfizer.
Anderson Cooper 360. Brought to you by Pfizer.
ABC News Nightline. Brought to you by Pfizer.
Making a difference. Brought to you by Pfizer.
CNN Tonight. Brought to you by Pfizer. Early Start. Brought to you by Pfizer. Friday night on Aaron Burnett Out Front. brought to you by Pfizer.
This Week with George Stephanopoulos is brought to you by Pfizer.
Today's countdown to the royal wedding is brought to you by Pfizer.
And now a CBS Sports Update brought to you by Pfizer.
Meet the Press data download brought to you by Pfizer.
This portion of CBS This Morning sponsored by Pfizer.
On how to find the hidden sugars in the American family diet. Sponsored by Pfizer.
There is a clear message that is coming through. This is becoming a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
And we're seeing it in the data. Unvaccinated Americans account for virtually all recent COVID-19 hospitalizations and deaths.
We still, to this day, do not have data on people who are coming into the hospitals who are vaccinated. That is a data point that we have left.
Individual who has recovered from COVID be exempt from the mandate to be vaccinated, given that they have natural immunity?
You have both more durable and robust and known immune response if you are vaccinated after you've been previously infected, and those are our recommendations.
The CDC doing a study saying the amount of natural immunity people get varies sometimes from person to person. This study seems to be suggesting something a little bit different.
There is no doubt about it in my mind that a vaccine-induced immunity is much more durable. It's going to hold up much better against the variants.
But if you just got your booster, it may lose effectiveness in a few months, says Marshall Voigt, senior epidemiologist at Virginia Department of Health, who just got a look at a new CDC study. It found third shots or boosters become less likely to protect against serious illness after about 4 months.
As high as the protection is with natural infection, what's the durability compared to the durability of a vaccine?
Here's what the study is saying in really plain language. If you had COVID, you will be protected against becoming really sick or dying if you were to be reinfected, again, by 88%. That's really significant.
But we don't know how long that immunity is going to last, so eventually people who've been infected who are relying on natural immunity, they too are going to need to get vaccinated at some point.
According to a new study, people are protected against symptomatic illness for at least 10 months after infection. And even at that 10-month mark, protection against severe disease and death is still at almost 90%.
This is the most comprehensive analysis yet on COVID immunity. Researchers from the University of Washington looked at 65 studies from 19 countries up until September of last year.
That is being heralded as a possibly a good thing, that we could end up with higher immunity, natural immunity. Does that make sense?
No, I don't think it is good.
This Delta variant, it spreads faster, and it is in many cases reported to be much more serious in terms of its impact. And the vaccine will protect you from it. And here's how I know. Virtually every person who is in the hospital sick with COVID-19 right now is vaccinated. I'm going to repeat that. Virtually, it's a fact. Virtually every person who is in the hospital right now sick with COVID-19 is vaccinated. And even more, regrettably, virtually every person who has recently died from COVID-19 was vaccinated. The loss, the tragedy of that loss, literally every person who has died from COVID-19 that we have recently been seeing was vaccinated. So it is time, and it is time to roll up your sleeves and get the shot.
People are vaccinated. They can feel safe that they are not going to get infected. Now, I got infected about 2 weeks ago. It was my third infection, and I had been vaccinated and boosted a total of 6 times.
This is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. Get vaccinated. Go fuck yourself.
This is a man who showered with his own daughter, who smiles when he's mad. This is a man who will say literally anything. If the Chinese military unleashed a deadly manufactured flu virus on the world, Joe Biden would blame you for it. And actually he did. People are dying of COVID, Joe Biden told us, because you have questions about an experimental mRNA shot that doesn't really work and whose long-term effects we can't know. You're the criminal here, not the Chinese government, because you're, quote, unvaccinated. You must be punished. That was the message from the White House, picked up and eagerly disseminated by Biden's equally soulless stooges in the media. And here's one of them, Leana Wen, formerly of abortion giant Planned Parenthood, now of CNN.
We have a very narrow window to tie reopening policy to vaccination status, because otherwise, if everything is reopened, then what's the carrot going to be? How are we going to incentivize people to actually get the vaccine? So that's why I think the CDC and the Biden administration needs to come out a lot bolder and say, if you're vaccinated, you can do all these things. Here are all these freedoms that you have, because otherwise, people are going to go out and enjoy these freedoms anyway.
So the unvaccinated might be, quote, enjoying freedoms, fretted Leana Wen. And everyone knows that under the U.S. Constitution, that's not allowed. Scurry back to your hovel, Kulak. No freedoms for you. The gruel is ladled at 4. Slurp it with gratitude. Oh, what a difference a year makes. Now we know that everything Leana Wen told us on CNN was a lie. And we know that for certain because, amazingly, Leana Wen just admitted it. This week, Wen acknowledged that actually this is not a pandemic of the unvaccinated. It's the opposite. The CDC, she said, has now determined that, quote, vaccinated people who never had COVID were at least 3 times as likely to be infected as unvaccinated people with a prior infection. And a Lancet study, continuing the quote, found that those who were vaccinated but never had COVID were 4 times as likely to have a severe illness resulting in hospitalization or death compared to the unvaccinated who recovered from it. I mean, what? So the vaccinated are 4 times as likely to be hospitalized or die from COVID. 4 times. So it turns out that none of your vax propaganda was true, to put it mildly. It was all a lie. The question is, can we get our lives back now? How about our economy, our jobs? When's the part when you break down in racking sobs of contrition and beg forgiveness for misleading the entire country on matters of life and death and hurting people? We look forward to that part, though obviously we're not holding our breath.
So in July, Undersecretary Cisneros acknowledged the DMED data, the database working properly, and also acknowledged things such as myocarditis rising 151%. So what I did, I went in today, I'm doing the same thing, 5-year average. However, I'm comparing it to 2022, and I only am using fixed wing pilots and helicopter pilots, active duty. So we get hypertensive disease, 36%, ischemic heart disease, 69%, pulmonary heart disease, 62%, heart failure, 973%, other forms of heart disease, 63%. Cardiomyopathy, 152%.
I share some caution on this because we just don't know the long-term side effects of basically modifying people's DNA and RNA to directly encode in a person's DNA and RNA, basically the ability to produce those antibodies, and whether that causes other mutations or other risks downstream.
I think another piece of very unique psychology here is it's now known this stuff doesn't leave the body. So the messenger RNA doesn't look like it breaks down. The spike protein is in the body. As long as we keep looking, we keep finding it. People are staying, they feel sick for a long period of time. There's a paper by Lee and colleagues showing little micro blood clots floating through the retinal veins and arteries for 2 years after these shots. I think what's going on, it's not like, admitting a flaw, like, I had an affair, I was an alcoholic. They're thinking to themselves, oh no, I took these shots and I bought the farm. Now everybody is in a relative state of personal terror. This is what's keeping people quiet. I had a kid come in my office last week. He's a young kid, went to college, came down to see me. He looked me in the eye deadpan. And he said, Dr. McCullough, am I going to have a cardiac arrest? And I think that is the subconscious play going on in everyone's minds right now. And that's explaining the behavior.
I've had a small number of people say that to me privately. But I think that as long as the establishment, including the political class, including the media, all the people who, pushed and promoted and forced this thing on people, they're not willing to admit any type of error. They're not even willing to draw the obvious connection.
Ironically, the left mainstream media and some of the alleged medical freedom movement are in lockstep on continuing to assert that somehow or another this thing is a vaccine. So let's start with the facts that are obvious. First of all, in April of 2020, both Pfizer, BioNTech, and Moderna, in their SEC filings, unambiguously stated that mRNA is a, and I quote, experimental gene therapy. That comes right out of their Securities and Exchange Commission filings. That is not Dave Martin's opinion. That's not somebody else's opinion. It is unambiguously what they said, which means that at the time that they were promoting what they were calling a vaccination, what in fact was happening was rather than promoting a vaccination, they were in fact promoting an experimental gene therapy. And they mislabeled it intentionally so that the public would be bamboozled into accepting it. So let's be really clear. That's a crime. That is actually domestic terrorism that was used to force people to take something that they would not otherwise take. That's the definition of domestic terrorism, and that's what it is. Now, I have said many times, Maria, as you know, that this was a bioweapon because in 2005, at the DARPA MITRE conference, where Ralph Baric made the statement that synthetic coronavirus fragments were, and I'm quoting right off of his CV, biowarfare enabling technology. Maria, I don't know if down under you guys have a problem with the common use of English language, but biowarfare enabling technology sounds to me like bioweapon.
Yes.
And so it turns out that when you go and look at not only that, but then you go and look at this 7 CFR Part 331 definition of what selected agents and toxins are, which is the schedule of what a biological weapon is, it turns out that on that list, the spike protein associated with any modification of coronavirus is in fact a biological weapon. That's the definition of the ruling. This does not stimulate immunity. The injection that was put into people's arms around the world, whether it came from Moderna or it came from Pfizer, instructs the human body to manufacture a scheduled toxin. And then the hope is that you have a robust immune system that after having told your body to create a bioweapon, your body then complies with creating an immunity to the thing you told your body to make. And this is where Aaron Siri's interpretation is entirely in error. Because the fact of the matter is, unlike the other things that he talks about in terms of injections, in this particular case, the injection is instructions to make the toxin, not instructions to stimulate an immune response. And this is the subtle difference that I think the Ninth Circuit got very correct in their majority opinion.
But to every COVID tyrant who wants to take away our freedom, hear these words: we will not comply. So don't even think about it. We will not shut down our schools. We will not accept your lockdowns. We will not abide by your mask mandates. And we will not tolerate your vaccine mandates. They rigged the 2020 election, and now they're trying to do the same thing all over again by rigging the most important election in the history of our country, the 2024 election, even if it means trying to bring back COVID. But they will fail because we will not let it happen. When I'm back in the White House, I will use every available authority to cut federal funding to any school, college, airline, or public transportation system that imposes a mask mandate or a vaccine mandate. Thank you very much.